Verse 1 says, gather yourselves together, yes, gather, O nation without shame. Now that nation without shame is Judah, and they're going to be judged. Verses 2 and 3, before the decree takes effect, the day passes like the chaff. Before the burning anger of Yahweh comes upon you, before the day of Yahweh's anger comes upon you. Seek Yahweh, all you humble of the earth who have carried out his ordinances. Seek righteousness, seek humility. Perhaps you'll be hidden in the day of Yahweh's anger. Well, Elohim is calling Judah to repentance here. He did the same thing with the northern kingdom of Israel before they were judged. That's in Isaiah 55, verses 6 and 7. Seek Yahweh while he may be found. Call upon him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake his way and the unrighteous man his thoughts. And let him return to Yahweh, and he'll have compassion on him, and to our Elohim, for he will abundantly pardon. Now, Jeremiah, who is a contemporary of Zephaniah, he gave Judah the same warning. That's in Jeremiah 3, starting at verse 13. Only acknowledge your iniquity, that you have transgressed against Yahweh, your Elohim, and have scattered your favors to the strangers under every green tree. Excuse me, and you have not obeyed my voice, declares Yahweh. Return, O faithless sons, declares Yahweh, for I am a master to you, and I'll take you one from a city and two from a family, and I'll bring you to Zion. Then I'll give you shepherds after my own heart, who will feed you on knowledge and understanding. Okay, so he calls here for Judah to turn back to Elohim, and all you humble of the earth, he says. Now, humility, he says, is carrying out his ordinances, seeking righteousness, and also seeking humility. But that's how you do it. That's what he wants out of us, is to carry out his ordinances. Verses 4 and 5, for Gaza will be abandoned, and Ashkelon a desolation. Ashdod will be driven out at noon, and Ekron will be uprooted. Woe to the inhabitants of the seacoast, the nation of the Kerethites. The word of Yahweh is against you, O Canaan, land of the Philistines. And I will destroy you so that there will be no inhabitant. Now, this isn't a reference to the Philistines in general, because they were wiped out about 100 years earlier by the Assyrians. We read here about the Philistines. It says the Philistines lost their independence to Tiglath-Pileser III of Assyria by 732 BC. And revolts in following years were all crushed. Later, Nebuchadnezzar II of Babylon eventually conquered all of Syria and the kingdom of Judah, and the former Philistine cities became part of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. So, but he mentions here the Kerethites. Now, that's a name for a branch of the Philistine people, and they settled in the southwestern region of Philistia, and they had roots in Crete, and that's where the Kerethites name came from. And the cities mentioned there, Ashdod, Ashkelon, Gaza, Ekron, Gath, they were the cities that it's being warned here. Verses 6 and 7, so the seacoast will be pastures with caves for shepherds and folds for flocks. And the coast will be for the remnant of the house of Judah. They will pasture on it. In the houses of Ashkelon they will lie down at evening, for Yahweh their Elohim will care for them and restore their fortunes. You know, apparently this is a remnant who's going to return to Judah after the Babylonian captivity. Well, their fortunes weren't exactly restored, especially in those cities. It could be a reference to the full restoration of Judah at the return of Messiah. Verse 8, I've heard the taunting of Moab and the revilings of the sons of Ammon, with which they have taunted my people and have become arrogant against their territory. Now, Jeremiah also spoke of the arrogance and ensuing judgment of Moab. Jeremiah spoke of this in Jeremiah chapter 48, starting at verse 27. Now, was not Israel a laughingstock to you, or was he caught among thieves? For each time you speak about him, you shake your head in scorn. Leave the cities and dwell among the crags, O inhabitants of Moab. Be like a dove that nests beyond the mouth of the chasm. We've heard of the pride of Moab. He's very proud of his haughtiness, his pride, his arrogance, and his self-exaltation. I know his fury, declares Yahweh, but it is futile. His idle boasts have accomplished nothing. Therefore I shall wail for Moab, even for all Moab shall I cry out, and I'll moan for the men of Kir-Heres. More than the weeping for Jazer, I shall weep for you, O vine of Sibmah. Those are all places in Moab, by the way. Your tendrils stretched across the sea. They reach to the sea of Jazer. Upon your summer fruits and your grape harvest, the destroyer has fallen. So gladness and joy are taken away from the fruitful field, even from the land of Moab. And I made the wine to cease from the wine presses. No one will tread them with shouting. The shouting will not be shouts of joy. See, Moab is celebrating the defeat of Judah and the defeat of Israel. And Elohim says, well, you're not going to keep up with your celebration. Ammon was the same way. Moab and Ammon both. In Jeremiah 49, verses 1 and 2, concerning the sons of Ammon, thus says Yahweh, does Israel have no sons, or has he no heirs? Why then has Malcolm taken possession of Gad, and his people settled in its cities? Therefore, behold, the days are coming, declares Yahweh, that I shall cause a trumpet blast of war to be heard against Rabbah of the sons of Ammon. It will become a desolate heap. Her towns will be set on fire. Then Israel will take possession of his possessors, says Yahweh. Going back to Zephaniah, verses 9 and 10. Therefore, as I live, declares the Yahweh of hosts, the Elohim of Israel, surely Moab will be like Sodom, and the sons of Ammon like Gomorrah, a place possessed by nettles and salt pits, and a perpetual desolation. The remnant of my people will plunder them, and the remainder of my nation will inherit them. This they will have in return for their pride, because they have taunted and become arrogant against the people of the Yahweh of hosts. Now the Moabites, where'd they go? What happened to them? They, they're enemies of Israel, enemies of Judah. Yeah, I hear the A word out there. Arabs. They became, we'll read about it here.
Exactly what does Yahweh of hosts
Means Yahweh of armies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the hosts means armies. Yes. Oh, yeah. Sometime during the Persian period, Moab disappears from the extant historical record. Its territory was subsequently overrun by waves of tribes from northern Arabia, including the Kedarites and later the Nabateans. In Nehemiah 4, verse 7, the Arabs, instead of the Moabites, were the allies of the Ammonites. Their country, however, continued to be known by its biblical name for some time. When the Crusaders occupied the area, the castle they built to defend the eastern part of the kingdom of Jerusalem was called Krak des Moabites. And guess what happened to the Ammonites? The Moabites became part of Arabia. So did the Ammonites. You know, we talked about that. We had in Psalm 83, it talks about the 10 horns that make up the beast. And Ammon and Moab are two of them. And all the ones they list there are all ones that became eventually conquered by Arabia and eventually became a part of Arabia. That's what we see today. Arabia, that's the hotbed of the religion of violence and destruction. And they're hell-bent on destroying the nation of Israel we see today. Verses 11 and 12 of Zephaniah 2. Yahweh will be terrifying to them, for he will starve all the gods of the earth, and all the coastlands of the nations will bow down to him, everyone from his own place. You also, O Ethiopians, will be slain by the sword. Now, ancient Ethiopia ruled Egypt from about 720 BC to about 650 BC. And that's who he's talking about here. The Babylonians conquered Egypt also. So in Ethiopia had conquered them, so they're the ones that get defeated also. Verse 13, he'll stretch out his hand against the north and destroy Assyria, and he'll make Nineveh a desolation, parched like the wilderness. Now, Assyria was east of Israel, But they invaded Israel from the north, and that's why he said he'll stretch his hand against the north to destroy Assyria. They were destroyed in 612 BC. This was detailed. We went over it with Nahum. We went over that about the destruction of Assyria and how he prophesied about it. Now, he says here, Nineveh is going to be a desolation parched like the wilderness, which is very interesting because back in that day, Nineveh was known for its exceptional irrigation system. But he says, no, you're going to be parched like the wilderness. Yeah, Nineveh disappears. Verses 14 and 15. And flocks will lie down in her midst, all beasts which range in herds, both the pelican and the hedgehog will lodge in the tops of her pillars. Birds will sing in the window, desolation will be on the threshold, for he has laid bare the cedar work. This is the exultant city which dwells securely, who says in her heart, I am, and there is no one besides me. How she has become a desolation, a resting place for beasts. Everyone who passes by her will hiss and wave his hand in contempt. Well, the city which dwells securely, that's speaking of Nineveh, and as mentioned earlier, they were destroyed by the Babylonians. And let's look at Zephaniah's last chapter here. Chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. Woe to her who is rebellious and defiled the tyrannical city. She heeded no voice. She accepted no instruction. She did not trust in Yahweh. She did not draw near to her Elohim. Speaking of Judah here, the prophet Jeremiah, he was a contemporary of Zephaniah. He echoed these sentiments from Elohim. Judah did not listen to the prophets. Now, I'm bringing this up about the contemporaries because Judah didn't have just a warning from one guy. There were several. Okay, they wouldn't listen to any of them. We see in Jeremiah 7, starting at verse 23, but this is what I commanded them, saying, obey my voice, and I'll be your Elohim, and you'll be my people, and you'll walk in all the way which I command you, that it may be well with you. Yet they did not obey or incline their ear, but walked in their own counsels and in the stubbornness of their evil heart, and went backward and not forward. Since the day that your fathers came out of the land of Egypt until this day, I have sent you all my servants, the prophets, daily rising early and sending them. Yet they did not listen to me or incline their ear, but stiffened their neck. They did evil more than their fathers. And you shall speak all these words to them, but they will not listen to you. And you shall call to them, but they will not answer you. And you shall say to them, this is the nation that did not obey the voice of Yahweh their Elohim or accept correction. Truth has perished and has been cut off from their mouth. Well, he knows they're not going to listen, so why is he warning them? Why? Why warn them if he knows they're not going to listen? To say that he warned them. You know who learns from this? Us. Okay? Paul said those things were written in the past for us to learn from, to learn by. Okay? Judah and Israel were destroyed because they turned away from the Torah of the Father. We're to learn from that. Jeremiah 22, verse 21. I spoke to you in your prosperity, but you said, I will not listen. This has been your practice from your youth, that you've not obeyed my voice. Judah, they did not trust in Elohim. In Jeremiah 17, starting at verse 5, thus says Yahweh, cursed is the man who trusts in mankind and makes flesh his strength, and whose heart turns away from Yahweh. For he'll be like a bush in the desert and will not see when prosperity comes, but will live in stony wastes and wilderness, a land of salt without inhabitant. Blessed is the man who trusts in Yahweh and whose trust is Yahweh. For he'll be like a tree planted by the water that extends its roots by a stream. It will not fear when the heat comes, but its leaves will be green, and it will not be anxious in the year of drought, nor cease to yield fruit. The heart is more deceitful than all else and is desperately sick. Who can understand it? I, Yahweh, search the heart. I test the mind, even to give to each man according to his ways, according to the results of his deeds. It talks about trusting in your own prosperity. Now, who would have thought 20 years ago that our country can collapse. 20 years ago, I never thought it could happen. It didn't seem like it's possible. Strong, raging economy, a lot of hard-working people, military without equal. Yes, there was a modicum of respect people had for one another. That's gone now. Anyone even, let's see, was there another terrorist attack today? They're all running together for me. I don't know about you. You know, Arabia, Bangladesh, Orlando.
What happened today?
I don't know. I was asking you if you heard. There had to be one somewhere, didn't there? I think it'd be the first day in, what, a couple months. They killed a priest. That was yesterday's news. Yeah, they said they slit his throat. That priest, 86 years old, was he? Yeah. Well, you know how bad they slit his throat? They slit it all the way and off. Okay. Right in front of in some Catholic church, right in front of everybody. Yeah, I was in France. France. Oh, it was. Of course it was. Well, who do you think it was? Methodist? Well, the Amish struck again, didn't they, Tom? Those guys, don't let them guys on the horses and the horse-drawn wagons fool you now. They look peaceful. Verses 3 and 4, her princes within her are roaring lions. Her judges are wolves at evening. They leave nothing for the morning. Her prophets are reckless, treacherous men. Her priests have profaned the sanctuary. They have done violence to the Torah. So the princes and prophets are like roaring lions doing violence to the Torah of Elohim. Boy, look at Ezekiel 22, starting at verse 25. There is a conspiracy of her prophets in her midst, like a roaring lion tearing the prey. See, he didn't have different messages for these different prophets. They all had the same messages. You know, the same words in many cases. He let them profess his word in their own words, in their own ways, because they were different people, but they all had the same message. They've devoured lives. They've taken treasure and precious things. They've made many widows in the midst of her. Her priests have done violence to my Torah, and they've profaned my holy things. They made no distinction between the holy and the profane. They've not taught the difference between the unclean and the clean. And they hide their eyes from my Sabbaths, and I am profaned among them. Well, what does that sound like? No distinction between the holy and the profane. No difference between the unclean and the clean. They hide their eyes from his Sabbaths. Boy, that's the world, isn't it? He says, I am profaned among them by these things. Her princes within her are like wolves tearing the prey by shedding blood and destroying lives in order to get dishonest gain. Boy. That's the prophets nowadays. It's all about the prophet with an F, not a PH. Jeremiah 23, starting at verse 25. I've heard what the prophets have said who prophesy falsely in my name, saying, I had a dream, I had a dream. How long? Is there anything in the hearts of the prophets who prophesy falsehood? Even these prophets of the deception of their own heart, who intend to make my people forget my name by their dreams, which they relate to one another, just as their fathers forgot my name because of Baal. Well, Elohim will judge the false prophets among the people. In Ezekiel 13, starting at verse 3, thus says Adonai Yahweh, woe to the foolish prophets who are following their own spirit and have seen nothing. O Israel, your prophets have been like foxes among ruins. You've not gone up into the breaches, nor did you build the wall around the house of Israel to stand in the battle on the day of Yahweh. They see falsehood and lying divination, who are saying, Yahweh declares. And when Yahweh has not sent them, yet they hope for the fulfillment of their word. Did you not see a false vision and speak a lying divination when you said, Yahweh declares, but it is not I who have spoken? You know, you almost have to go to those TV preachers to hear that much anymore, saying that God told me this or God told me that. Therefore, thus says Adonai Yahweh, because you have spoken falsehood and seen a lie, therefore, behold, I'm against you, declares Adonai Yahweh. So my hand will be against the prophets who see false visions and utter lying divinations. They'll have no place in the council of my people, nor will they be written down in the register of the house of Israel, nor will they enter the land of Israel, that you may know that I am Adonai Yahweh. What does that mean? They won't be written down in the register of the house of Israel. What does that mean?
Book of life.
Right. It's a book of life. Their name's not going to be there. You see, the register of the house of Israel, that's those who will be in the kingdom. That's what that is. And he continues, it is definitely because they have misled my people by saying peace when there is no peace. And when anyone builds a wall, behold, they plaster it over with whitewash. So that those who plaster it over with whitewash, that it will fall. A flooding rain will come, and you, O hailstones, will fall, and the violent wind will break out. Behold, when the wind is fallen, will you not be asked, where is the plaster with which you plastered it? Therefore, thus says Adonai Yahweh, I'll make a violent wind break out in my wrath. There will also be in my anger a flooding rain and hailstones to consume it in wrath. So I shall tear down the wall which you plastered over with whitewash and bring it down to the ground so that its foundation is laid bare. And when it falls, you'll be consumed in its midst, and you'll know that I am Yahweh. Thus I shall spend my wrath on the wall and on those who have plastered it over with whitewash. And I shall say to you, the wall is gone and its plasterers are gone, along with the prophets of Israel who prophesy to Jerusalem, who see the visions of peace for her when there is no peace, declares Adonai Yahweh. Zephaniah 3, verses 5 and 6. Yahweh is righteous within her. He will do no injustice. Every morning he brings his justice to light. He does not fail, but the unjust knows no shame. I've cut off nations. Their corner towers are in ruins. I have made their streets desolate, with no one passing by. Their cities are laid waste without a man, without an inhabitant. See, Elohim has cut off nations in the past. This should serve as a warning to Judah, but they didn't heed his warnings. You know, the recent warnings that were given, there was Moab in Isaiah 15:1, the oracle concerning Moab. Surely in a night, Ar of Moab is devastated and ruined. Surely in a night, Kir of Moab is devastated and ruined. Egypt was given a warning like that. Isaiah 19:1, the oracle concerning Egypt. Behold, Yahweh is riding on a swift cloud and is about to come to Egypt. The idols of Egypt will tremble at his presence, and the heart of the Egyptians will melt within them. There have been many, many other nations that Elohim has judged that Judah knew about. Especially, they just had, what was the best example they had? Their neighbors up north in that northern kingdom. That one right there. But they didn't heed the warning. They were almost destroyed by the Assyrians too. Most of Judah was, except for Jerusalem. And Assyria had them surrounded. And what happened? They woke up the next morning, 185,000 of them were dead, and the rest went home. Yeah, well, they saw that. It wasn't enough.
Didn't they blame that on the mice or something?
Some did, yeah. Yeah, that's pretty nasty mice, aren't they?
Ain't no way that many were wasted without Elohim himself.
Verse 7. I said, surely you will revere me, accept instruction. So her dwelling will not be cut off according to all that I have appointed concerning her. But they were eager to corrupt all their deeds. Surely Judah would accept his instructions so that her dwellings won't be cut off. Surely that'll happen. Jeremiah 36, verse 3 says, perhaps the house of Judah will hear all the calamity which I plan to bring on them, in order that every man will turn from his evil way. Then I'll forgive their iniquity and their sin. Did they not have enough warning? Did they not have another chance? Did they not? What was he going to do? They were not eager to stop corrupting all their deeds. I mean, that's just all they wanted to do, just corrupt their own deeds. Verse 8. Excuse me. Therefore, wait for me, declares Yahweh, for the day when I rise up to the prey. Indeed, my decision is to gather nations, to assemble kingdoms, to pour out on them my indignation, all my burning anger. For all the earth will be devoured by the fire of my zeal. Elohim says to Judah, wait on me. They're to wait on him because he has things he's going to do. Okay? Here's what he's going to do. He's going to gather nations. He's going to assemble kingdoms. And then he's going to pour out on them his indignation. That's what he says he's going to do. And what do you think?
What's indignation?
Hatred, wrath. Yes. You know what? That's what Revelation's all about. Revelation is all about kingdoms that he's gathered and assembled and destroyed from the time of John until the time of today. He talks about the rise and fall of the Muslim Empire. He talks about the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. He talks about the rise and fall of the Byzantine Empire. All of them. Then he talks about the rise again of the Muslim Empire, and here we are. He talks about their fall. That hadn't happened just yet. It won't happen until he returns. But he says, that's what my decision is. I'm going to gather nations, I'm going to assemble kingdoms, and I'm going to pour out on them my indignation, all my burning anger. Burning anger. Yep. Here's the thing. He says, wait for me. Okay? He says, wait for me. He's going to destroy all those that are against his people. We are to wait for him. Psalm 27, verse 14, wait for Yahweh. Be strong, let your heart take courage. Yes, wait for Yahweh. In his time, it'll happen. Psalm 37, verse 7, rest in Yahweh and wait patiently for him. Do not fret because of him who prospers in his way, because of the man who carries out wicked schemes. And verse 34, wait for Yahweh and keep his way, and he will exalt you to inherit the land. When the wicked are cut off, you will see it. Proverbs 20, verse 22, do not say, I will repay evil. Wait for Yahweh, and he will save you. Lamentations 3, verses 25 and 26. Yahweh is good to those who wait for him, to the person who seeks him. It is good that he waits silently for the salvation of Yahweh. Micah 7, verse 7, but as for me, I will watch expectantly for Yahweh. I will wait for the Elohim of my salvation. My Elohim will hear me. And one more, Habakkuk 2, verse 3. For the vision is yet for the appointed time. It hastens toward a goal, and it will not fail. Though it tarries, wait for it, for it will certainly come. It will not delay. You've seen those videos on YouTube where something is happening, and they say, wait for it. Okay, wait for it. Something's going to happen at the end. Well, that's what he's saying here. As we're watching all that's going on, he says, wait for it. That ending is going to be something now. Verse 9 of Zephaniah 3, for then I will give to the peoples purified lips, that all of them may call on the name of Yahweh to serve him shoulder to shoulder. You know, some people say that this means that ancient Hebrew will be spoken by his people in that day. And maybe, but I don't think that's what this is saying. It's more likely he's referring to the cleansing of the people and the lack of uncleanness in their verbiage, is what I think it's referring to. Verse 10, from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my worshipers, my dispersed ones, will bring my offerings. You know, he says, so beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, his worshipers are going to bring offerings. this could mean the gathering of his people back into the land of Israel, or it could refer to a specific offering that Ethiopia is going to bring to Israel. And that's spoken of in Isaiah 18. Verses 1 and 2 say, "Alas, O land of whirring wings, which lies beyond the rivers of Cush." That's speaking of Ethiopia, by the way. "Which sends envoys by the sea, even in papyrus vessels to the surface of the waters. Go, swift messengers, to a nation tall and smooth, to a people feared far and wide, a powerful and oppressive nation whose land the rivers divide." And skipping down to verse 7, "At that time a gift of homage will be brought to the Yahweh of hosts, from a people tall and smooth, from a people feared far and wide, a powerful and oppressive nation, whose land the rivers divide, to the place of the name of Yahweh of hosts, even Mount Zion." I don't know what that means, but it could be referring to a gift of homage to Israel. Verses 11 and 12. "In that day you will feel no shame because of all your deeds by which you have rebelled against me. For then I will remove from your midst your proud, exalting ones, and you'll never again be haughty on my holy mountain. But I will leave among you a humble and lowly people, and they will take refuge in the name of Yahweh." Elohim will remove the proud and the haughty, and he says he's going to leave a humble and lowly people. We read in Isaiah 61, the first 4 verses, "The Spirit of Adonai Yahweh is upon me, because Yahweh has anointed me to bring good news to the afflicted. He sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to captives, and freedom to prisoners, to proclaim the favorable year of Yahweh and the day of vengeance of our Elohim, to comfort all who mourn, to grant those who mourn in Zion, giving them a garland instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, the mantle of praise instead of a spirit of fainting, so that they'll be called oaks of righteousness, the planting of Yahweh, that he may be glorified. Then they'll rebuild the ancient ruins, they'll raise up the former devastations, they'll repair the ruined cities, the desolations of many generations." Verse 13, "The remnant of Israel will do no wrong and tell no lies, nor will a deceitful tongue be found in their mouths, for they shall feed and lie down with no one to make them tremble." So the remnant of Israel will have nothing to be afraid of. There'll be no fear there. They're going to be righteous. And going back to Isaiah 60, verses 21 and 22, "Then all your people will be righteous. They'll possess the land forever, the branch of my planting, the work of my hands, that I may be glorified. The smallest one will become a clan, and the least one a mighty nation, and I, Yahweh, will hasten it in its time." Zephaniah 3, starting at verse 14. "Shout for joy, O daughter of Zion. Shout in triumph, O Israel. Rejoice and exult with all your heart, O daughter of Jerusalem. Yahweh has taken away his judgments against you. He has cleared away your enemies. The King of Israel, Yahweh, is in your midst. You will fear disaster no more. In that day it will be said to Jerusalem, do not be afraid, O Zion. Do not let your hands fall limp. Yahweh your Elohim is in your midst, a victorious warrior. He'll exult over you with joy. He'll be quiet in his love. He'll rejoice over you with shouts of joy." Well, his people won't be afraid. He's going to be there among them, in their midst, just as it says in Daniel, like it says in Revelation, and other scriptures, says in Isaiah. Verse 18, "I will gather those who grieve about the appointed feasts. They came from you, O Zion. The reproach of exile is a burden on them." So he's going to gather those who grieve about missing the appointed feasts, or possibly grieve over the ability to appreciate their fullness by celebrating them in Jerusalem, because we're going to be celebrating feasts again coming up this fall, but we can't do them fully. We can't do them fully. All we can do is what we can do. It's not until we get back to Jerusalem after his return that we can fully celebrate these feasts, do the offerings, and do everything prescribed for us to do. In Isaiah 66, verses 22 and 23, for just as the new heavens and the new earth which I will make will endure before me, declares Yahweh, so your offspring and your name will endure. And it shall be from new moon to new moon, and from Sabbath to Sabbath, all mankind will come to bow down before me, says Yahweh. And in Zechariah 14, starting at verse 16, then it will come about that any who are left of all the nations that went against Jerusalem will go up from year to year to worship the King, the Yahweh of hosts, and to celebrate the Feast of Booths. Yeah, Sukkot. And it'll be that whichever of the families of the earth does not go up to Jerusalem to worship the King, the Yahweh of hosts, there'll be no rain on them. And if the family of Egypt does not go up or enter, then no rain will fall on them. It'll be the plague which Yahweh smites the nations who do not go up to celebrate Sukkot, the Feast of Booths. For this will be the punishment of Egypt and the punishment of all the nations who do not go up to celebrate the Feast of Booths. And in finishing Zephaniah, verses 19 and 20, behold, I'm going to deal at that time with all your oppressors. I'll save the lame and gather the outcast, and I'll turn their shame into praise and renown in all the earth. At that time I'll bring you in, even at the time when I gather you together. Indeed, I'll give you renown and praise amongst all the peoples of the earth when I restore your fortunes before your eyes, says Yahweh. Well, Elohim promises that Israel will be restored, and they'll be brought back to their land. All their fortunes will be restored to them. Let's look at Jeremiah 29, starting at verse 11. For I know the plans that I have for you, declares Yahweh. Plans for welfare and not for calamity, to give you a future and a hope. Then you'll call upon me and come and pray to me, and I'll listen to you. And you'll seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart. And I'll be found by you, declares Yahweh, and I'll restore your fortunes, and will gather you from all the nations and from all the places where I've driven you, declares Yahweh. I'll bring you back to the place from where I sent you into exile. Isaiah 60, starting at verse 15, whereas you've been forsaken and hated with no one passing through, I'll make you an everlasting pride, a joy from generation to generation. You'll also suck the milk of nations, and you'll suck the breast of kings. Then you'll know that I, Yahweh, am your Savior and your Redeemer, the Mighty One of Jacob. Instead of bronze, I'll bring gold. Instead of iron, I'll bring silver. Instead of wood, bronze. Instead of stones, iron. And I'll make peace your administrators and righteousness your overseers. Violence will not be heard again in your land, nor devastation or destruction within your borders, but you'll call your walls salvation and your gates praise. See, the same message was given by Zephaniah as was given by Isaiah, as was given by Ezekiel, as was given by Jeremiah and others. Same message. A warning. Turn back to him. Turn back to his ways, or he's going to destroy you. But you're not going to listen. And I know you're not going to listen. And you're going to get destroyed. And he's going to build nations. And he's going to assemble empires. And he's going to bring his wrath down on them. And we're to wait on him. And then he's going to regather his people, which is what we've been seeing. Going to bring them back into that land. And then they're going to be restored. They're going to be fully restored. And their prosperity is going to be restored. After one more time of his wrath being poured out on an assembled empire. So, any questions on that?